Nice and sharp. Nice and sharp.
All we know is a lie. And the truth has been paid for in blood.
I've made films for a long time and did a lot of independent kind of film work. And then, but I was getting really frustrated that what was in my head was not coming out on the screen. Mm-hmm. So about 10 years ago, really out of just frustration, I said, I'm going to try puppets because this human actor thing is not working for me. I can't do what I want. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote a short film. I said, well, let's start with a short film. So I did one called Shine, which is this barbershop horror film, and that has these guys, right?
All right.
So yeah, and so I did that short film, and it was a lot of fun, a ton of fun, and that's where I met my lead puppeteer, Jason Ropp. And so I said, okay, let's try something else. So we made another short film, and then after that, we made Frank y Zed. Puppets were just a way to tell the story. It was never like, oh, I'm going to do a puppet film. It was like, I'm doing a story about a Frankenstein monster and a zombie, and I want them to look like this. I don't want them to be a person with makeup on. I want them to be this way. And so it was really more about how to tell the story the best, and puppets just felt like the best way to do it. The original idea of like a Frankenstein's monster and a zombie that depended on each other to survive, like that part kind of just jumped into my head. And the other part that jumped into my head is that Frank's dome would be glass, and you would see his brain, and the zombie would kind of chew on it like a dog would chew on a bone, which is in the film, but it's not that, it's not that clear. But that part came very like all at once. And then I started, and then I think maybe at about the same time, or if not like very shortly after, was also that the Frankenstein monster was afraid of humans. And so he only fed the zombie squirrels. So kind of that, all of that came together. And then of course, if that's the idea, then you're like, all right, well, the zombie's going to have to eat a human. And what happens when the zombie eats a human, but yeah, that original idea was about 10 years ago, I think, is when I had that idea. Mary Shelley's book is just amazing. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's my, like, I have a much stronger connection to her book. And I don't mean that in just like a pretentious kind of snooty way, but it's just an incredible book. And people always say like, oh, I'm going to do something so different and tell it from the monster's perspective, And even sometimes with Frank y Zed, it's like, oh, it's more about from the monster's perspective. But like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is from the monster's perspective, mm-hmm. I mean, it's told in letters and things like that, but it's just this. And I think what I love the most about the Frankenstein monster is that it's a monster that also kind of does bad things. It's not pure this or pure that, and I think that was the most important thing for this film, is like, I want to have monsters that really do bad things that you will also hopefully still like. So it's not like, oh, they're perfect, cute things that just look a little different. I'm like, I'm not into that. That's not at all what I'm like, mm-hmm. I want to make you hopefully love them. I love these characters, but they're monsters still. They're not, they do kind of monster things. And so that was I think that's what is so amazing about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's really complex mm-hmm. and really interesting. Her Frankenstein monster is very different from what you see in a lot of movies, certainly different from like the James Whale mm-hmm. kind of stuff. He learns to read and things like that in the book. That's also something that came very early on, that I wanted. I just thought it would have the most meaning if their relationship had this deeper connection. And the film hopefully is a little bit about like being in your day to day, just working a job day to day, and yet you have kind of things in your past and stuff like that. And that's something that I feel in my life, like have just the same, is it just the same day in, day out, you know, kind of that monotony. But I think also it's just, you know, I love the idea of thinking of these characters of like they can't be apart, and also being together has parts of it that are really challenging. And that just was the most interesting, because I want the characters to be real. Like that's one of the things I try with my film. Like I want it to be very real, because I think that's what the audience wants. It's harder, and if it fails, it's so embarrassing, really more difficult. But I think it's ultimately, hopefully, more rewarding for the audience. The climax was very, very difficult. First of all, it's like very difficult to write, because I had a list of things that had to happen. It's like you have to see all the weapons used, all of these different things in terms of the arc. Like Frank has to be brought low, and Frank has to come back. But also, like really importantly, I knew that I wouldn't have 30 puppeteers every day. I would have like 5 puppeteers at most. And so I also had to write the battle in a way that I could split up all of the characters so that I can do this huge climactic battle with very few people. And so what I do is I storyboard a lot. These are the storyboards. This is the Orgy of Blood right here. Right. And so like I do, like here's panels from the Orgy of Blood. And so I write, like literally storyboard everything out. And because with puppets, you know, if you want to shoot their feet, that's a totally different shot than their body. It's not moving the camera. It's you have to build a floor, you have to do their feet, you have to raise everything up. So the whole Orgy of Blood was drawn, everything was storyboarded, every single shot. And then we only shoot the storyboards. So it's literally, you just write exactly like here's a sequence here. And if you look at the storyboards, it's the exact Orgy of Blood. Like every single shot is exactly the same. And the whole film is like done, is just cut that way. And then as I get extra ideas, those kind of go in the margins here. So, but it's like really intense planning, because also I didn't have enough rocks to build like all the way around the castle. So you have to shoot and plan everything where the camera shoots this way and just shoot kind of half the scene, because usually the camera flips back and forth. So you're shooting like just this half. Then you tear all the stones down, build the back of the set, and shoot the reverses. But you're just doing single setups. And there's no coverage. So it's really, really intense. And it's all just pieces of paper and putting all up and saying, do this, do this. And where it gets scary is that if I make a mistake, and a puppet gets destroyed, there's no getting back. There's no going back. Like the puppet, there's one of each. Right. And one of my things with the Orgy of Blood is I was like, when a puppet gets destroyed, it needs to be completely destroyed. Like there's like ripped apart. Like there's no going back at all. And so you shoot the whole thing, just really going like, I hope I got all the shots. Like if I miss a reaction shot or this or that, you're dead. So you have to be like super, super, super precise. And that's tricky because, you know, I think there's like 1,500 shots in the Orgy of Blood. Right. So yeah, it's complicated. It's complicated. Like with the film, again, when I wrote it, I wrote the film specifically to not be a puppet film. So like there's a forest. Like you would normally you would never have a forest that people like walk through, in a graveyard and like exteriors, because a lot of times, you know, films like this, it can feel like there's one set and you just feel like you're right here the whole time. And so with this one, I was like, no, I was like, I want to feel like it's a whole world. So in the castle, we're going to go through halls, they're going to walk through tunnels, and they'll be, but it was really hard to try and use like all the different tricks to try and make that happen. a trick I used is hanging miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
So like in the priest castle, this would be like here, and we'd have like two of them, and there's no digital effects. It's just a hanging miniature in front that's really close to the camera, and then the little priest puppet is back here, and it makes it feel like really big. And so that was like one of my goals, was how do I make it really big and feel really detail rich? So it's a lot of things like this, you know, like stained glass. And so one of the things I did too is I always said, all this detail in the world, just fill it, but not shoot it as if it's important. It's just the world. It's just a regular thing. But that was definitely like part of the challenge, is like, how can we make sure that it's super rich? And one of the things I've actually heard, especially in the beginning, is that it's so visually rich that you have a hard time kind of listening, because you're just like kind of sucking in all the detail. Yeah. For me, like Frank and Zed are very much the other. They're this thing that you kind of blame for problems. And it's like, if we just go kill those guys, everything will be fine. You know, it'll just be, and I think the thing I liked with the opening is the idea of kind of going like, it would be easy to make that deal. Like maybe I would make the same deal. Like I'll be fine, and someone else has to pay. You know, somebody else has to pay for it. And I think that's something that we all deal with, this idea that like, I mean, global warming, all these things, like there's so many things that we're all like, yeah, you know, somebody else will just pay. Well, I'll be okay today, and somebody else will pay. And I think like, I personally feel guilty for a lot of those choices. So I think with this, like, I just wanted, you know, hopefully a movie where you identify with both sides. You know, you can kind of understand a bit of why the villagers did it, and also real importantly, the monsters are acting that kind of monster function. It was just very clear to me what I wanted the audience to have, because it's what I wanted for myself. Maybe I'm like, you know what I want the audience to have? I want them to see monsters. I want the monsters to actually be monsters, to not be, you know, like I said earlier, just like something that looks really ugly, but is like the nicest thing of all time. Like, I don't like that. That's boring to me. I think doesn't exist in real life, you know? And for the villagers and the humor and stuff like that, I'm just like, this is funny. It's very simple. I'm like, this is funny. But again, like, I don't like jokes that like make fun of how people look, or jokes about sex and that, like, to me, that's not funny. It's too easy. You know, I think it's much funnier if it's in the world. I think it's like much funnier if it like doesn't take that easy joke. And then beyond that, like with the horror stuff, again, like with the Orgy of Blood, I'm just like, I was like, these are the things you have to see. Like I was just like, I have to see these things, you know? It's not like, to do anything else would be why am I making this movie if I'm not going to do these things? Like, if I'm doing the Orgy of Blood, like this is what you do. If I'm going to make this movie, I'm going to do it. It feels right to me as a fan. This is what I want to see, and I'm going to try and deliver that, and not take any shortcuts. So that I think just ended up being the film. And so it's a lot about kind of saying like, just this is what people deserve, maybe, right? This is what I think my audience deserves. This is what I want them to have. Like, I want the sad stuff. I want that. I want to be like, I want to see, and to me, again, I think that's like, it's a bigger risk, because if you fail, it's like, oh, look at my dolls trying to be sad. It's ridiculous, but the whole thing is ridiculous. So you might as well be like, whatever. I'd rather just put everything out there and just totally go for it, and trust that there are other people who feel the same with me, that really want everything. And I'll do my best to give everything. There are a lot of horror fans, I feel, that are also like really sweet, really nice people that aren't this kind of like, oh, everything is terrible or whatever. Like, I mean, that's the way I am. I'm a big horror fan. So I think the thing that's been most exciting is to see people like be happy in a horror film, or to see like to respond to the heart of the film, which is something that I think is a really important part of horror that doesn't get talked about as much as I would like. So if there's anything that a tiny thing that is very exciting about the reception is that part of the story people seem to like. Where it is like Meet the Feebles very much is that like all the mechanisms are hidden. It's very over the top. The designs of the puppets are like very much their own. They're very innovative. There's a big world. I think it shares all of that with Meet the Feebles. I think where it's different is like this film is very PG with blood. Like this film is like nothing. It's never like puppets kind of behaving badly. So I think honestly, in a way, Frank and Zed shares more with the Muppets than it does with Meet the Feebles. Like it's more in line with that, and it just happens to have a lot of blood. You know, there happens to be a lot of gore. But if you take the gore away, it's a Muppet movie. It's very sweet. It's very, you know, so I think, but I think aside from that, you know, there's lots of stuff like Drag Me to Hell is, I think, one of the most underappreciated horror films from Sam Raimi. It's so good. I don't know why people don't talk about it. It's so over the top, and the camera work and like everything is just bam, 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 bam. You know, I think actually like, Frank and Zed, like of course Lord of the Rings, like a lot of Peter Jackson's work actually outside of Meet the Feebles, it absolutely, like in terms of the world building and like and the depth of the story, I'm definitely like doing my best to try and pretend I'm Peter Jackson, you know, absolutely. So another person I think a lot is there's an animator named Satoshi Kon who did Paprika and he's just so good. And the thing about Satoshi Kon is like he does like animation for real, and has done it for a long time, like where he's telling like real stories about and things that are really scary, or he's going to represent dreams, or he's going to represent like homelessness, or you know. And I think that's another, like his work was a huge influence on me to be like, just do it, just like tell a good story if you can. And I think so he was another huge just such an inspiration. I mean, so, and the way he prepares, you know, I mean, he's passed away, but the way he prepared all of his stuff and was so controlled and like took a long time. And another person that I just like, yeah, he's just incredible. And a lot of times it takes a lot of rehearsal, a lot of work, because also usually it's more than one person, you know. So doing Frank, you have Frank here, you have one hand here, you have another hand here, you have someone doing the eyes, and then someone making the fingers move. So you could have 5 people that all have to work together to make that character like come alive. And that takes a lot of rehearsal and a lot of kind of coordination to get that. It would take like frequently 22 to 30 takes to get a single shot, and you only get like 11, maybe 10 to 11 shots a day, because it's just, you just have to rehearse to get all these. And that's why I have to storyboard everything, because you can only get like one little moment to be alive, you know? I mean, the thing that I'm happiest about this film is that even after such a long time, I still like it. Because it, you know, I mean, there's definitely periods like in any big thing where it's really frustrating. And the last thing I wanted to do was work on Frank and Zed. But there was always something that would kind of pull me back a little bit. There's always like a little thing. And I think maybe part of it is the characters and the world that I really like, you know? And so I'm dying to go back and do some more stuff. I would absolutely love to. There's a lot of more, there's many more monsters that I want to see, you know? Like the Baba Yaga and, you know, all kinds of things that I think that would be, you know, really kind of interesting monsters to see in this world.